You're here because you want a promotion. Maybe you've been working hard, hitting all of your goals, and still not seeing the results you want. Promotions don't only happen because you're deserving. They happen because you've positioned yourself as indispensable. Today on this webinar, you're going to learn three things: how to identify and solve the right problems that make promotions inevitable, how to gain visibility and support of cross-functional partners, and how to position yourself both for internal promotions and external opportunities. My name's Michael Pietrack. I'm a pharmaceutical industry recruiter and the host of a leadership podcast called The Pharmaverse. But today I'm playing host to a discussion with a leading pharmaceutical executive coach, Angela Justice from the Justice Group. And I've been so impressed with Angela. I'm sure you will be too. A little bit about her. She's a PhD for starters. Uniquely, Angela was an MSL for 5 years, an MSL trainer for 5 years, and during that time she elevated to Chief Learning Officer before becoming the Chief People Officer for another 5 years. Angela is now a highly sought after executive coach where she helps pharma executives reach their career goals. She's a true one of a kind, Angela Justice.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's such a pleasure to join you and to join all of our listeners. This is a topic that comes up again and again, right? We hear so many times people wanting to advance professionally, to develop, and ultimately to get that promotion that they're working so hard for. And yet often they struggle and they get really frustrated, not sure why. It's just not working out for them. So I'm so thrilled that today we get to share a framework that I've developed and honed over the years. It's the exact framework that I've used to secure every single promotion I've earned in my career. It's the same framework I've helped leaders and teams earn their promotions. And here's kind of the interesting thing. Not only was I that MSL getting those promotions, but as you mentioned, I was a Chief People Officer. So not only is this framework something I've developed and used myself and with my teams, it's something I can tell you from the inside track, being that HR leader in organizations. It's exactly what companies look for when they're making their promotions. So I can tell you from being on both sides of the table here that this framework works. It's proven, it's tested and true, and I can't wait to share it with everybody today.
You bring a truly unique perspective. So where should we even begin?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple key things to have in mind first off. So, a lot of people think that promotions are something that are rewards, right? They get a promotion because they've been working hard, they've been hitting their goals, meeting their targets, just doing a really good job. And maybe they've been in their role for a time, right? And they think it's time that they get that next step and they get that recognition that they deserve. But the critical mindset shift here that has to be made is that promotions aren't rewards. They're not recognition. They're business decisions. In fact, they're business investments. Companies make investments in promotions, and frankly, with it, they carry some risks. So it's important that the person who's angling for, trying to position for a promotion, is thinking really strategically about how that promotion is going to offset any potential risks to the company and make it absolutely rock solid that the value that they're going to deliver in that new promoted role is going to be worth it for the company.
So if they're going to invest, you got to be solving a critical problem.
That's exactly right. That's really the key, is solving a critical problem.
So what are the right kinds of problems to even think about solving?
Yeah, that's really, I think, where most people fall down. That's the challenge that people face. They think, gosh, okay, I know I need to solve a problem. I know I need to do something that's going to make this promotion feel inevitable. But where do I even begin? What kind of problems do I solve? And so this is where my framework really comes into play. When I think about a framework for a promotion, I think about three key filters. Those filters are strategic alignment, measurable impact, and visibility. So We can get into each of those three, but then where I think it really becomes interesting is when you think about that really as like a Venn diagram. So each of those three categories, consider them as overlapping circles. You have strategic alignment intersecting with measurable impact, intersecting with visibility. When you get all three of those interacting and you get that center, that sweet spot where everything comes together, that's where you're positioned for a promotion. But if you only have one or even two of the three, you're going to fall short. So would it help maybe to talk about each of those three filters on their own and then go into the overlaps?
I think that's perfect. Yeah. So what do you mean by strategic alignment?
Yeah, so when I think of strategic alignment, I mean the problem that you're trying to solve needs to be squarely focused on what your company cares about. It has to be a business priority. And one of the key ways you can find that out is to think about what your company's goals are. Every company has goals and targets that they're working towards, and those are often shared in leadership meetings, in investor reports or earnings reports, in press releases. There's a number of different places that those goals can be shared. And more likely than not, those goals are the same goals that your individual goals are going to be based upon for the coming year. So as soon as you know what your company cares about, you know that that filter of strategic alignment means that everything that you're doing has to be squarely focused on solving one of those problems to advance towards those goals.
And I can tell you from personal experience, with other employees that I've had in my organization, sometimes their goal doesn't align with the company's goal. And even though it may be a decent idea, it might just not be on strategy for where we're trying to go.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's something I see happen, frankly, more often than it should. I think people think they have something really interesting or exciting that they want to work on, and maybe they do, and maybe it is really interesting and exciting. But if it isn't directly aligned with the goals that the company is working towards, then frankly, it's just wasted effort, and it can actually lead to a whole lot of problems besides just wasted time and energy.
Yeah. All right. And the second filter, that measurable impact, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so measurable impact, what you're doing actually has to make a difference. And frankly, you have to be able to prove it. So I like to say that you need to show your work. And what I mean by that is you need to show how the work you're doing is actually making a difference and is leading towards progress towards those goals. So if you're working on a problem that is strategically aligned, but it's not doing anything or it's not making a measurable impact, you can't see the results, then nobody really knows that what you're doing matters. So measurable difference or measurable impact means you have to be able to show that what you're doing is making a tangible difference. So I'm trying to think of a good example here. If I'm working on a new initiative, for instance, and let's say it's squarely aligned with one of the company's goals, and I'm spending a lot of time and energy on it, but I can't point to any success. I'm not moving the needle towards that goal at all. I'm really just spinning my wheels. And it really isn't going to do anything to help the company advance. And worse, it's not going to do anything to help me advance. So that's a real challenge for people, is to make sure that you know, one, what it is you're working towards, but then two, how you're going to show that progress and how you're going to show that what you're doing is actually making a difference.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if you don't show a measurable impact, then the only thing that they're going to measure is the cost of that.
That's right. Absolutely.
The cost of a new position and the cost of your backfill. And then if you're not really showing any measurable impact, then it just becomes sort of a nice to have thing, not a need to have. But with measurable impact, you could show that it's a need to have.
That's right. And you bring up an important point, because if you're working on something and people know you're working on it, right? It's something that is strategically aligned and it's visible, so people see it. They see the money you're spending, they see the time that it's taking, they see, all of the work that you're doing, but it's not making a difference. Now you have a massive credibility gap. And that's one of the killers of a promotion is credibility gap. So having something that's strategically aligned and visible, but not making a difference, or worse, not making a difference in the right direction. So yeah, spending a lot of time and energy and money, but not moving the needle, credibility gap, I can promise you, you are not positioned for promotion.
And you bring up visibility, so take us there.
Yeah, so visibility, you need to make sure that people are actually seeing your work, right? This seems so simple, and yet it's really not. A lot of people just like to put their heads down and work, right? They're working on their goals, they're measuring their impact, they're delivering these results. But if nobody knows that they're doing this, if the right people don't know, and by right people, there's a few different categories of people, and we can talk about those in a moment. But right now, let's just say people, right? Let's just say leadership. If leaders don't know what you're doing, then, I call that hidden heroics, right? You're working hard, you're getting results, but you're doing it really in a vacuum. And without the visibility, again, you're wasting a lot of time and energy, the hidden heroics. And this is something that I see a lot in our industry because we have so many really smart people who know what to do, right? They know what the goals are, they know how to measure it, they know how to make a difference, but they're not that great at self-promotion. They think it feels maybe a little, I don't know, smarmy, salesy, icky to be talking about their work a lot. And I think that's another mindset shift that we have to get people out of. It's not that you need to self-promote, it's you need to help people see how what you're doing is actually advancing the goals of the company to the end that they're looking for. And that visibility is absolutely critical. If people don't see your work, it doesn't matter. It's not happening.
I love hidden heroics because a lot of the candidates that I talk to on the phone that are feeling underappreciated, that's a really important feeling that people have that leads to people making job changes. If they
Yeah.
feel underappreciated, it's almost like they feel invisible and like none of their work matters, none of their work is being seen. And but if they do show their work, if they make it visible to others and especially the right people, as we'll talk about, then they'll feel appreciated on top of everything else. It leads to job satisfaction, it seems like.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I really have to say hidden heroics is the thing I see that burns people out the most, that leads to the most frustration, that leads to people wanting to leave their jobs. And, it's because they're waiting for people to take notice, right? To see the hard work they're doing, to see the impact that they're having. But, everybody's busy doing their own work. You have to raise your hand. You have to show what you're doing. You have to talk about it. You have to let people see the good things that you're doing. They're not just going to notice. They're not just going to, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, wow, that was amazing. We want to promote you. No, you actually have to advocate for yourself. You have to make yourself seen. And again, there's ways to do that that don't feel, icky, right? There's ways to do it that feel professional and feel very thoughtful without feeling like you're just, a walking billboard for yourself.
Right. So 3 filters: strategic alignment, measurable impact, and visibility. But now let's talk about a real life example. And a lot of the people that are on this that are attending are from the medical affairs world. Can you share an example of a medical affairs professional that identified a high value problem and how it led to their promotion?
Yeah, absolutely. I can share a couple stories. Maybe I'll share a story of an MSL who was on the right track, but didn't quite hit all of those filters and how we were able to turn it around.
Sure.
And then, I can also share a story of somebody who just kind of got it right out of the gate. But I remember, there was somebody on my team at one point, really great MSL, super driven, very ambitious, really thoughtful and strategic. And he had identified a need, and that need was to engage nurses. So our company was, as most are, really highly focused on those KOLs, those key opinion leaders who are out there really shaping the opinions of other physicians and professionals in the field. But this MSL recognized, you know what? these nurses that work with these KOLs, they kind of have the inside track, right? They're really making a lot of decisions. They're influencing these KOLs, they're influencing patients, and they have some gaps in their knowledge and their education about our company and about the products and about the strategies that we have and the things that we can offer. And so this MSL said, you know what, I think if we targeted these nurses and we were able to engage and align them around some of our company's strategies and really provide opportunities to educate, boy, that could be a real strategic advantage because these nurses are incredibly influential and maybe not sure people see it or know it, right? So he came up with some strategies to do just that. And, fantastic, right? Strategically align, get those nurses engaged, get them closer to the company, educate them on the programs and the products. Measurable impact, right? You could see how if you do that, you could start getting increased engagement from those clinics or those centers. And you can see how you could get some visibility by sharing the fruits of these labors. Now, it's easy to see how you could meet all three of those filters, but in the beginning, he wasn't, right? He was only focused on getting those nurses engaged and doing programs that were going to make the nurses really happy. But he wasn't doing a great job of showing that work to others in the company. So what people saw were these expensive programs that weren't targeting any of our KOLs, right? Why are you wasting your time engaging these nurses when your target list includes these KOLs and we don't see any activity with them at all? Now, it's a simple shift, right? All he had to do was start making sure that the right people saw the rationale and saw the impact, saw the strategic alignment. And as soon as that happened, as soon as we strategized and found a way for him to start sharing his work, then all of a sudden, he was the golden child, right?
Yeah.
Like, brilliant idea, doing this amazing work, engaging an entire new population of potential thought leaders and influencers. And all it took was just being really thoughtful about how to apply those three filters.
So one of the things I picked up from that story, and thanks for sharing it, is this individual saw the problem or saw the need, proactively did something, and didn't wait for the promotion before he did something.
That's right.
They saw the problem, identified a solution, and proactively went after it, versus sitting back saying, well, we really need this. I'll do it. So there's a element of proactivity here.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant call out, Michael. Proactivity is really important, right? Again, you can't sit back and wait for people to just say, oh, here's a cool problem, go solve it. Or here's a cool project that's aligned with our goals and will give you this great visibility and impact. No, you need to go find those problems. You need to think about what it is that could move the needle for your company, and you need to take some action and initiative to get the ball in motion. Now, look, he couldn't go out and just run a program for a bunch of nurses and spend all this money without getting some alignment from somebody, right? He had to get his manager's approval. He had to get some endorsement. But he took the initiative. He did that. He made enough of a case to say, hey, this is something that is strategically aligned. I think it's going to help the company in these key ways. And if I do this, I think we're really onto something, right? So he had enough of initiative to get the ball in motion. But in order to take it to the next level and get that promotion and really get positioned for promotion, you need to make sure the right people saw that and take it just a little bit further. But it really does all come down to proactivity. You can't sit around and wait. It's really all about you taking that initiative and making it happen.
It's really the fundamental point of this whole webinar, really, is being proactive about all of this. Now, you said you had two examples. Is there another one you want to share?
Yeah, so that was an example, I think, of where it worked out really well, and that person was able to get promoted. They had, again, all of those filters were checked, even if they didn't check the boxes immediately. Another example, so this is actually something that I did, and this was really the first time that I really codified this and applied this framework. So similarly, I was a medical science liaison. I was actually a senior medical science liaison at this time. And I knew that one of the challenges that we were facing as a company was getting time with our KOLs, right? And being able to get in front of them and share the right messages and engage them in a really powerful and meaningful way that brought them closer to our company so that we could leverage them for clinical trials or publications or speaking engagements or other activities. What we were finding was that we had a limited set of slide decks that were approved, right, by commercial, regulatory, legal. And, we were to go out into the field and share these slide decks with our KOLs. But I'm sure you can imagine that after, one time of sharing that slide deck, the KOL's like, yeah, I got it, right, Angela? I don't need to hear this one again. What do you got for me? And, we didn't really have a lot. And of course, in our field, we're highly regulated. This is something that we have to be really mindful of. We can't just go out and talk about anything, right? So I knew that there was a huge gap here because our MSL team needed to be out there talking to these KOLs and bringing them closer to the company and making sure they had all of the current thinking. But they were getting a little tired of the same kind of tried and true things that we had approved to talk about. Similarly, I knew that we were spending a lot of money as a company to get those presentations developed and prepared. So we were engaging vendors to build these presentations. And, they did an amazing job, right? We were working with some incredible vendors. But to get a single presentation developed, it took months because of all the legal review, all of the alignment, and just the timelines, right, of managing external vendors. And, it was just frankly an expense that I think there might be a better way here. So I spent some time building relationships with people inside the company and really probing externally our KOLs to say, hey, what is it that would be valuable to you? What do you want to learn and know from us? And I found that there were a couple of really interesting intersections. So what I did, I talked to my internal stakeholders and I said, look, I think I could build a slide deck or two that address some of these points that our KOLs are very interested in. They're aligned with our strategic goals because of, X, Y, and Z. And I think this would be a really fun thing for me to do because it gets me closer to people in the company, but it gets me out in the field having conversations that our KOLs want to hear. And by the way, I'm just going to do this for free, right? You don't have to pay me. I'm not a vendor. I'll just do this. So I built a slide deck. I got it approved by legal, regulatory, commercial. It was very strategically aligned with our goals. I went out, I shared it with a number of KOLs, got some amazing feedback from them, which I, of course, immediately brought back to all of the stakeholders internally to say, hey, look, our KOLs love this. This is what they're going to do with the information. This is how we can continue to grow this idea. So it was strategically aligned. I had some measurable impact, and I was making the work really visible, right? So the three filters were kind of checked right there. And then, everybody internally was so excited because, hey, there's this new stuff that our MSLs can talk about. And they were happy that our KOLs were requesting meetings as opposed to pushing our, field team away saying, hey, we've heard enough from you. So they said, hey, can you train all of these other MSLs? So I went out, I trained the other MSLs on these talks, and now we rolled this presentation out throughout the entire country. We saw engagement just skyrocket. We had so many people requesting to meet with us. They wanted to see this presentation. We were actually asked to present this at conferences. So this was something that not only gave us visibility, me visibility, right, and our team visibility, but our company got visibility. So again, it's just taking those three filters and just using them at every single turn to make sure that the time and energy and money, right, that was being spent on this was accomplishing the goals that mattered, that were measurable, and that were seen by everybody. So that positioned me for my promotion to associate director, where I led a field team, because they said, wow, look, if she can do this on one presentation and get the entire company engaged around this, what else can she do, right? So I was able to basically make a case that there was more where this came from. And to put me in a leadership position, I'd be developing more programs. I'd be able to help our other MSLs develop similar types of programs, and we would basically just be force multipliers for impact within our medical team. So it was a really just fun example, but again, it all came down to applying those three filters consistently.
Yeah, great story. Those are wonderful experiences. And I think people learn from experiences more than just like a didactic, here's the things. You know, it made me think of an example of a candidate that I worked with that was like the first MSL hired on the team. No training, no onboarding. It was a disaster. And instead of complaining about it, she put together the onboarding and training for the next person.
Brilliant.
And she showed it to upper management, and upper management was like, we're eventually going to hire a trainer. You're it. You know, and she was promoted as a result of her proactive work there instead of just complaining.
Yeah, and see, that's such a great example of a really clear business need that she saw because she experienced it firsthand. She knew it would have measurable impact because she knew how long it took her to get up to speed and up and running on that job, and knew they'd be hiring more people so she could shorten that lead time and time to impact. And she was sharing her work, right? She was making it visible and known. So immediately, what did she do? She positioned herself for a promotion. Brilliant.
That's right. Well, you know, some of the listeners may be sitting there going, what's the problem I'm going to solve? What do you do when the problem is not immediately obvious?
Yeah, and often it's not, right? I mean, I think that this takes some thinking, it takes some conversation, it really takes some time to figure out the right problem to solve. And I think the most important thing that you can do is just start having conversations, right? So, if you think about the work you're doing and challenges that you're facing in your immediate role, like the candidate that you mentioned who was able to identify a problem that immediately impacted her, terrific, right? Those are wonderful problems to approach and think about. But then you got to have conversations with people to say, hey, look, where are you feeling some pain points? What's something that maybe doesn't feel as efficient to you as it could? What's an untapped opportunity? What's the one thing that you've been dreaming about doing but just don't have the time or energy or budget for? What are those things that in your wildest dreams you would love to see in place at this organization? And as soon as you start having conversations like that, with a bunch of different people, ideally cross-functional people, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, your colleagues, your peers, you're going to start hearing some themes, right? The first conversations you have, maybe you're not going to have that brilliant idea just magically appear. But if you keep having those conversations and you keep hearing the same themes occurring over and over again, well, now you might be onto something. There might be a kernel, right, of truth there, a kernel of idea that you can plant and that you can grow into something that's going to have big impact. But again, you always want to make sure you're applying those three filters, right? Strategic alignment, measurable impact, and visibility. Those filters are absolutely critical for any promotion.
So you talked about cross-functional relationships. What are some actionable tips that someone can use to develop some of those cross-functional relationships?
Developing cross-functional relationships is so much easier than people think it is, right? I think people think, gosh, I'm, in my team, I'm just doing my job. Who am I to go talk to somebody in finance or talk
Like
to
there's
somebody
a
in
huge
marketing?
firewall that's there or something.
Yeah, and the firewalls do, they can make it more challenging, but I think often that becomes more of an excuse than a reality, right? We make it harder on ourselves than it really needs to be. There's no reason anybody in medical affairs, for instance, can't go talk to somebody in commercial or in regulatory or legal or marketing or finance or you name your function. There's really not a reason. Now, don't be spilling company secrets to an external stakeholder, right? Be really thoughtful about what you're sharing and maintain confidence and sensitivity. But internally, you can really talk to anybody that you want to talk to. And if you're asking them questions about their function, their role, their hopes, their dreams, their challenges, well, how is that a problem, right? How would anybody really anticipate any challenge with that? So I think the first thing to do is to identify a potential list of stakeholders, right? Cross-functional people that could be your advocates, that could be your allies, your sponsors, your collaborators, people who are going to feed you those ideas, right? That are going to tell you what they see from their perspective. What is their vantage point of the business? What problems do they see? Because more often than not, the problems that are the right problems to solve, they're sitting in the intersections between, right? It's between a function, it's between a process, it's the handoff between one thing to another. They're the opportunities, those handovers, those intersections, those areas where things often get missed or dropped or unseen. That's generally speaking where the sweet spot lives.
Well, I'll tell you, just from a recruiter's perspective, the internal relationships, the cross-functional relationships are not only valuable for internal promotions, but they're also valuable for external opportunities. In today's market, if a person doesn't know somebody at the company where they want to go, the chance of them getting the job is almost nil.
Yeah.
So what I see is that people that build these great cross-functional relationships wherever they are, and they've have a track record of doing that for years and years and years, then more and more people know who they are and that they're good. It's almost like, they're getting this visibility to a much broader audience. And when that broader audience goes to other companies, it's like this dandelion effect where and all the little seedlings go to all these different companies. Well, now you have advocates at those companies.
Yeah.
And it actually leads them to opportunities that they wouldn't have had if they didn't build that cross-functional relationship to begin with.
Yeah, I think that is so true. And I think about when I've gone to different companies, it's because I've been pulled in from somebody who was at my current company, went to a new company and, pulled me along, right? So I think that very much happens. What do you think? What do you think in your experience, what's the best way for people to leverage those cross-functional connections when they're considering making a move?
So one of the things that I tell people to do is once they make the decision in their mind that they're going to make a job change, what I do is I tell them to go onto LinkedIn and play a game of where are they now? All your first line connections, all the people that would be an advocate for you, where do they work now? Are they in a decision-making seat? And could they eventually be the conduit to you getting a job? Now, the recruiter in some aspects is that advocate as well. So if you have an external recruiter presenting you to a hiring manager, and in that presentation saying, oh, and by the way, he knows Angela Justice in marketing. And then the hiring manager calls Angela Justice in marketing. They're like, oh my gosh, Michael Pietrack? Love that guy. And next thing you know, that person elevates to the top of the stack.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
That's how I see it playing out.
I think that is so right and so true. And I tell you, as a chief people officer, I experienced this time and again. And where I thought it was really powerful, and again, I think this may come as a surprise to some people, but it was when the people internally that were recommending or giving a reference on a potential candidate were not directly in that potential candidate's line of command, right? Or not in that immediate function. But again, if you have somebody from marketing saying, oh yeah, that MSL was amazing. They were so strategic. Everything they did gave measurable results. They really made a point of sharing their work with us and their insights. Boy, that's incredibly compelling, right? Having those strong cross-functional relationships as advocates, extending beyond your current role, that's an insider tip, I think, that is really going to help position people for promotions.
And here's another thing. And it's not widely talked about because I don't even know if it's legal, but it happens. These backdoor references, we call them. It's, oh, I know somebody at that company. Let me just ask. And so a couple things happen. One, if the person, if they like, I've never heard of that person, that's not a bad reference, but it's also not impressive. But if that person's been working hard to create a stock value for themselves in the company, and everybody knows them, everybody likes them, they're involved cross-functionally, they're not just stuck in their silo doing their day job, and then a new manager asks somebody, even at their other company that they're leaving, hey, what's the word on the street about this person? And it's a good reference. Sometimes that's better than even people on your reference list.
Oh, absolutely. And Michael, that's a question I get asked all of the time. And that is, what is a backdoor reference? How do these things work? And how do I make sure that I'm positioning myself so that if they're happening to me, they're going to be happening in a way that's going to help me, not hurt me? So anything more you can share on that? Because again, this is a question that I get asked all of the time, and you're the perfect person to provide some insider tips on this.
Oh, thanks. Well, just to recap, part two, we're trying to find the right problem. Sometimes that cross-functional partner, that intersection point between your department and their department, that handoff point, maybe the problem exists in there, and that might be a good place to find the problem. But if you're not interacting with cross-functional people, you might not find it. So that's one way you can help find the right problem. But now let's say you find the right problem. How do you go about solving it? Is there a methodology for that?
Yeah, so when you want to so you found the problem, right? You know what it is that you can solve. You have a great idea, you know it's strategically aligned, you believe that you can demonstrate measurable value and impact, and you know that you have the right people internally that are going to be seeing this work, right? People that you can share this work with and share the impact and the progress with. So how do you solve the problem? Okay, well, it depends on the problem, obviously, right? But I think the key is you don't want to just share it or just solve the problem alone in a vacuum, right? I think this is something I see a lot of people make this mistake. They find a problem, they come up with what they think the right solution is, and then they go off and they do the work and they solve the problem. But that's really not the most powerful way of positioning yourself for promotion. Because what you want to be doing when you're positioning yourself for a promotion is making sure you're bringing all of these people along with you that are going to influence whether or not you actually get the promotion. So what I encourage people to do when they find a problem we're solving is start having some alignment conversations, right? Just start asking people, hey, I've identified this problem, right? Maybe you shared it was a problem or somebody else shared it was a problem. Let's just validate. Is this really a problem? Can we agree that if we solve this problem, it would actually be a good thing? Okay, so have some of those conversations. It seems really simple and obvious, but I tell you what, a number of people skip this step. And when they do, they start expending so much time and energy. And then if it falls short or if people don't care as much as they thought they would, and then they're not getting that promotion at the end of it, they just get really frustrated and demoralized.
I'm glad you brought that. Let me cut in for a second because that's what I was envisioning. I was envisioning, hey, here's a problem. I'm going to go solve it. I'm going to be the hero here. Here's the solution at the end. But you're saying there's got to be little intermediate check-in points throughout the process.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And again, this is where I've seen so many people get really frustrated because they may have this brilliant idea for a problem and then they just want to go do it, go solve it, and spend all this time and energy. And then it may not have the right impact. So rather than just rushing to solution and trying to be that hero, I think what you want to do is think of this as a multi-step process. So find the problem, have some conversations, start solving it, start showing your work, right? Measuring the impact, having conversations with people, and start doing little things to work towards implementing that solution and thinking of it like an iterative cycle. So you're constantly going back to your sponsors, your advocates, the people who agree that this is something we're solving, and you're checking in. Right? You're showing your work. Showing your work, honestly, is one of the biggest keys to positioning yourselves for promotion. Make sure you're not just rushing headfirst into something. Stop, check, align, show your work.
Yeah, because the last thing a company really wants is some maverick
Yeah,
that's going to sidestep all kinds of, hierarchy and different things. And just, especially in the medical affairs world, like you said, is so regulated.
yeah,
You get the company in big trouble if you're not, towing the line. But also from a recruiter's perspective, we'll also say one of the questions that comes up in every final interview is some derivative of, are you strategic? Are you a problem solver? Because no manager wants to hire somebody that they got to, here's the problem, well, let's fix it. I don't have to come up with the solution every time as the manager. So these problem solving stories are valuable when you're on an interview as well. So
absolutely.
even if it doesn't result in a promotion, it could help you in that form too.
Well, I think that's right. And I think this is something that, this should be an outcome of this content for anybody, which is none of this effort will be wasted, right? The question that, we've gotten and I want to make sure we address is, what happens if I do all of this work and I don't get promoted? Okay, well, look, none of this is wasted effort because you are one, learning and growing and becoming more strategic, becoming more thoughtful, becoming more of a business minded leader and professional simply by going through this process and applying these filters. But okay, let's say your company doesn't promote you for whatever reason, right? It could be something internal, it could be external headwinds, it could be any number of reasons. But now you have this amazing story that you get to share. When you're applying for new roles, when you're interviewing with new companies, you get to talk about how you applied a very methodical process of thinking through these three different filters to come up with an initiative that was going to solve a problem in a measurable way that was giving visible impact to your organization. Whether or you're not, your current company is in a position to promote you as a result, you have absolutely elevated yourself as a professional and a leader, and you're positioning yourselves for external opportunities as well.
That's a beautiful segue into the story that's been coming into my mind. So there's this candidate that I placed at this giant pharma company, a very slow moving, glacially slow pharma company. And she's really innovative when it comes to AI. And she set up this whole AI platform to gather medical insights or something. And she was going right through your methodology. She was showing people along the way. MSLs were like, "Oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever." And then they're like, "Hey, we want you to help all the MSLs at the company do this." And she's like, "I'm happy to do it, but don't you think that should be a standalone position?" And they did not promote her. Well, guess who gets the call? Me. And hey, this is the type of role I want. And now I'm making proactive calls about her to new companies that need somebody to do what she can do. And so even if it doesn't result in a promotion right away at the whatever company you're with, it could result in one at a different company.
Absolutely. And think about all of the relationships that she built even internally along the way. She now has a group of MSLs that are absolute cheerleaders for her because they saw the problem that she was solving for them, the value she created for them. I'm sure she has advocates and the medical directors who are benefiting from these rich insights, and the marketing team and the legal and regulatory teams that presumably she had to work through to make this happen in a way that was okay for the company. So she has this network of cheerleaders that even though the company wasn't able to promote her, and again, we know how some of those big pharma companies move. It can be, not on your timeline, but she has all those cheerleaders. She did something amazing. And now she has someone like you who's advocating on her behalf to companies who have that problem they need to have solved. She's positioned herself again for a promotion. That's fantastic.
And I've heard you say relationships drive promotions. In the recruiter world, we say your network is your net worth. And so
Exactly.
if
Say that again, because
relationships
that's
drive
just brilliant. That
promotions,
is just brilliant.
you know,
Your
tell us
network.
more about why relationships matter so much when it relates to promotions. Why does it matter so much?
Well, I want to say that saying that you said because I think this should just be like drilled into everybody's memories here because it's so powerful and so important. Your network is your net worth. Your network is your net worth. That's brilliant.
I didn't come up with it, but it is true, especially in the recruiter world. I mean, because you're only as good as your network. But what do you mean by relationships drive promotions? I know we've talked a little bit about it, but bring it home for us.
Yeah, so I think it's similar, right? You need to have people who are going to be, I say banging on the tables for you, right? I think you need people in the room banging on the tables for you, the rooms that you're not in, right? Think about those promotion conversations. When are they happening? They're happening when you have a group of leaders, right, sitting around a table behind closed doors and they're comparing people. They're talking about, who did what, how that work mattered, how that work was aligned. And if you don't have people around that table who are aware of what you did and aware of how you think and contribute and the value that you bring to the organization, your manager might be banging on the table for you, but if you don't have other leaders around that table who say, oh, yeah, wow, I saw that, or I know about that, or she came and talked to me and shared that insight with me. Can you believe that we have somebody like that doing that kind of work here? Of course she needs to be promoted, right? You need those people who are advocating for you. And it's great to have your manager be one of those person. It's critical, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost more powerful to have others also banging on the table for you. That shows that the work you're doing is resonating, it's carrying through the organization, and it's bigger than just you or your function. And then it's also not just your manager's fight, right? Managers get really like stuck in the middle on promotions all of the time. Their, employees are saying, "Oh, I want to get promoted, put me up for promotion, why aren't I getting promoted?" And the manager is getting pushed back from above saying, "Look, we can only promote so many people, or we don't have the budget, or this role isn't big enough." Right? It's not really about the work or the effort. It's about the value of the role. So managers are put in the middle a lot of times, and it's an uncomfortable spot. But if they have colleagues around them saying, yeah, why aren't we promoting this person, right? Like, of course, this person should be promoted. Look at all of the effort that they've put in. Look at the value they've created. Look at the impact that they're having on our goals and progress. Now it becomes much, much, much easier for people to approve that promotion.
So I hear you talking about three different types of relationships. There's that collaborator that is like this cross-functional partner. There's advocates, the banging on the table. I call
Yeah.
it the army of advocates out there.
Yes.
Peers or leaders who champion your work, and that could even be outside the company. But then sponsors, not just peers, but senior leaders who are pushing for your promotion, even though they're not your manager.
Yeah, absolutely. Those, all of those relationships are critical, right? You need the collaborators who are going to get in the trenches with you and help you be part of the problem that you're trying to solve, be part of the solution. Because the more people you have engaged, the more amplification of your work you get. So having some collaborators that are with you is critical. Having the advocates, right, the people who are banging on the tables, who are saying, yes, of course, we want to see this person promoted, critical. And then you need the sponsors, the people who are actually putting your name forward, who say, wait a minute, we've been talking about, John and Jane and Sam over here for promotion. What about Michael? Did you guys know that he's doing this incredible piece of work, right? You need the people who are going to sponsor you, who are going to put your name in conversations where promotions can happen, where development can happen, where opportunity can happen.
And again, this can also happen not in real time, but down the road. Like here's an example. I placed a guy that was a regional director of MSLs into like this executive director, national director type of role. And his job was then to start building out a brand new team. Well, he picked a very senior MSL from his previous team who he thought was really ready for a managerial position, but there was just nowhere for the person to go. So that person that ended up getting the regional director job under this new regime got his promotion for doing good work and visible work, but it didn't happen at the company where he was doing that visible work. So
Right.
it might not happen in real time.
That's exactly it. And I think that's something we really need to make sure that our listeners here understand. This isn't wasted effort, right? Any effort that you're spending to identify the right problems to solve, to finding and building those cross-functional collaborators, advocates, and sponsors, and making the impact of your work visible internally, externally, beyond, all of that is going to set you up for a promotion. You know, you're right. It may not happen immediately. There's a lot of factors outside of your control, but it does happen. And when you have these amazing stories to share, when you have the quantitative and qualitative impacts of your work that you can communicate, magic happens.
There's the PhD coming out, qualitative and quantitative. I knew it was coming. Well, so we have some questions coming in from the attendees. One question is, this is a good one. How can you balance solving problems that matter with handling your day-to-day responsibilities?
Yeah, that's yes. I'm not at all surprised that we got that question. I think that's a really good one and something that's a challenge, right? Because, you know, everybody has a full plate. You're working at your job, you're, you know, putting in likely long hours doing a lot of really hard work just to accomplish your current goals. And now we're telling you, you need to go find a new problem to solve and you need to measure it and talk to people and align and track and show your work and all of that. But look, I mean, I think the way to think about this is you need to ruthlessly prioritize what it is that you're doing. Everything that you're doing needs to fall through these three filters. Everything that you're doing has to be strategically aligned. Everything has to have measurable impact, and everything must be visible. And I challenge everyone on the line to take a look at their calendars, to take a look at how they're spending their time. And I bet you anything that you're doing work that doesn't pass those three filters. And that's the stuff you need to let fall off your plate. And I know it sounds hard and I know it sounds scary and it's like I can't do it, but I promise you, you can. There are ways to be much more strategic about the work that you're doing and to say, look, this particular thing that I've been working on and spending time on, is it actually strategically aligned? Okay, maybe, maybe not. Is it actually adding measurable impact? And are people, the right people, seeing the results? And if you're getting a no to any one of those three things, I challenge you to redirect your time and your energy and your focus to something that truly is going to pass those three filters. So yes, you may need to spend a little bit more time or energy to do this, but look, you also need to create the new role that you want to get promoted into. That means you need to find a way to do this work and solve this problem. So yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think you're probably wasting some time that you can get rid of and add some more strategically aligned priorities to your plate. And that's going to get you much farther in the long run. And by the way, that's what you have to do at every increasing level of leadership. You need to weed out the work that isn't moving the needle and bring in the work that passes these three filters. So frankly, that's just what it takes to move up in the world.
Good insights. Another question, you know, I don't know if this has already been answered with that last one. Aside from not fitting into the three filters, is there a mistake that you often see people make when trying to position themselves for promotion?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and I'd love your thoughts on this too, but what I often see is that people just frankly aren't in the right mindset. So what people, you know, people would come to me when I was a chief people officer all the time, and they'd be so frustrated that they didn't get a promotion, so frustrated with their manager, with the leadership. You know, they worked so hard, they hit their goals, they got an exceptional rating, like they thought they were checking all of the boxes, and they didn't understand that the reason they didn't get a promotion wasn't because they weren't doing good work. They were doing great work, right? And we really appreciated them and valued them. And likely we were valuing them and rewarding them with a bonus or some equity or, you know, a higher salary. But they weren't getting a promotion because what they showed was that they were doing their job exceptionally well. they weren't creating that next level job that was truly that next level role or promotable role. So just doing a great job in your current role, all that does is show that you're great at your job. It doesn't show that you have identified a bigger business need that you are qualified to solve.
That's a huge paradigm shift. I got to think anybody listening to that would really have a paradigm shift. So that's great insights. I don't have anything to add to that. That's pretty amazing.
It's a tough one though, right? Like, I mean, I think this kind of deserves a little time, and I challenge people to really think about this and think about where their mindset is at, because it really does take thinking harder and more about how to create that next level role. It isn't just doing your job incredibly well. You need to do that, right? Do your job well. But you need to create that next level role by creating the scope of your role that's bigger, that's adding more value, disproportionate value to your company. How about you? What do you see when people are, coming to you, they're frustrated because they didn't get promoted? What do you see as some of the mistakes that they're making?
Well, first of all, I think that they look at it as they've been slighted.
Yeah.
And that it's a personal attack on them, like somebody's saying, you're not good enough. When it really isn't that. You're getting great ratings. You're doing your job, just like you said, you're doing your job great. But that doesn't always mean that you're going to get a promotion. Other things that I see sometimes in the MSL world, somebody's been doing an incredible job and they don't get that promotion like senior MSL or principal MSL, even within the same function. Mm-hmm. And it becomes like this time-bound thing. And people get frustrated by that because it's like, well, okay, I'll just sit here for another year and then I'll be senior MSL. It doesn't make sense. But I think sometimes people will work really hard and it not be visible. I do think that's a big takeaway from anybody listening. It was a takeaway for me, is not making your work visible. And it's not a show-off kind of thing. It's not, hey, look at what I did. It's more about just, gaining visibility, maybe with a question. Hey, is this on point? Is this what you're looking for? Or is this bringing value to the greater team?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, most of the time it's just because there's a log jam. And, think about field medical for a minute. If you're an MSL that reports to a regional MSL, regional director, that reports to a national director, and you want to stay in field medical, where are you going to go? Mm-hmm. It's a logjam. You're stuck in traffic. Yeah. But the thing is, you can keep doing these great visible things for the point in time when that regional director maybe leaves or gets moved, or maybe they get a medical director or scientific director job or something, and then that position's open. That's not the time to start making your work visible. It's too late.
It's too late. Exactly.
You got to almost do it ahead of time.
Yeah.
But then when you're in that interview, even for that internal promotion, don't rest on your laurels that they're going to remember all the things that you've done. You got to interview for that job and you got to showcase what you've done.
That's right.
I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
no, I think that's right. And the other thing, I think you raise a really interesting and important point, and something that frustrates people in field medical and like field commercial, or really any team where you have kind of these layered levels, right? People think, well, there's no opportunity for promotion because we only have one regional director, two regional directors, and a national director. And until they leave, right, there's no opportunity. But this is where I challenge people to be a bit more creative, a bit more provocative, and to think not just about positioning themselves for promotion internally today, but to what we've been talking about earlier, which is, again, there's no lost effort here, right? If you are getting to know people internally, not only are you helping to identify problems that are worth solving, you're building that network that, again, your network is your net worth. I love that so much. Mm-hmm. You're building your network that's going to help you internally, but also potentially externally down the line. And who's to say you couldn't come up with a new role that is a promoted role that's never existed before. Like the person who came up with that AI solution. Gosh, was that even a glimmer in anyone's eye like a year ago, 2 years ago? Probably not, right? But now there's probably all kinds of opportunities for roles that just didn't exist. That if you find the problem to solve that actually passes the filters, well, who knows, right? I think you can actually create something that could end up adding value that would offset the cost and risk of a promotion. So I would encourage people to think really creatively there, but also recognize that even if you don't get promoted at your current company or not on your timeline, you're still doing things that are positioning yourselves for growth and development and a promotion down the line, be it at your current company or potentially elsewhere.
That's right. Another question has come in. I work in a very siloed company. How can I gain visibility with senior leaders while working cross-functionally?
Yeah, that's I think especially again for field-based roles, this can feel really challenging because you're kind of away from where all of the decisions are made, you're away from where the hub of activity is. But I think, this is also where you have to be a bit proactive and take some initiative to find ways. Now, I never encourage anybody to go around their manager and, set up meetings with like the head of so and so without their manager's knowledge. But I would brainstorm with your manager, your leadership team to say, hey, look, I'm really interested in learning more about this or getting some visibility with this part of the company or this leadership. How can I do that? And more often than not, your managers, your leaders, they want to help you. And especially in the field, they recognize that it can be a little bit isolating. And so people that want to get a bit more connected to, HQ, I think people tend to try to find opportunities for that to happen. But, start lower in the organization. You don't have to start with like the VP or SVP of a function. Start with peers. Start with, the accountant that works on approving your expense reports. Just get to know them. Start getting to know people in other functions regardless of their level. And ultimately, you're going to be building your visibility. And frankly, that will work its way up.
Another question came in. This is one that I've seen personally. What do I do if my manager is not wanting me to be promoted, doesn't want to lose me, I think is what they're saying?
Oh, doesn't want to lose me. Well, that's an interesting challenge. Yeah, that can happen. And it's really frustrating, right? When you have a manager who's frankly thinking a little selfishly, a little short term, that can be really challenging. And I think, one of the best things you can do in that case, there's a couple of things, but one of the things that you need to do is recognize that you need to build and diversify your power base, right? So if you're kind of solely reliant on your manager and that's, you're letting that be the block and you're not progressing beyond that point, you need to find ways of building more of a power base within your organization. So you need to build those collaborators, those advocates, and ultimately those sponsors. So if your manager isn't putting you forth for promotion, but others are seeing this great work that you're doing that's aligned, that's measurable, that's visible, they start asking the question, look, why aren't we bringing this person forward? Why haven't we considered this person for a promotion? And I've seen that happen. And honestly, it's not a great look for that manager because they get called into question why they're not leading in a more strategic and thoughtful way. So my first step would be broaden your power. Maybe the first step actually is have a conversation with your manager, right, about what it is that they want and need. There's probably some kind of deeper fear that's underlying that. They're feeling maybe like they're a bit blocked in their career. Find a way to connect with them and help solve their problems, but then start to broaden your network within your organization and get those collaborators, advocates, and sponsors pounding on the table for you.
Yeah. Another question, this one I'll take if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. How can someone know it's time to move on from their current company if they're not getting promoted? Well, when I think about making a job change, if you think about it like as getting surgery, you know, it's usually there's comorbidities. In order to go through a job change situation, you got to really know it's time to be ready. But what I tell people to think about is this acronym called CLAMPS. And usually you can identify at least 2 pain points in CLAMPS. So the C in CLAMPS is challenge. So sometimes someone is yearning to be promoted because the job has just become so boring and easy and it's lacking challenge. Other times when people want to get promoted is because they feel like they're overworked, the job's too challenged, they should be getting paid more to do this job. So if there's a C issue going on there, that really is a comorbidity to the A, which is advancement. But before that, L is location. So it could be a commute time that causes people, I can't do this drive anymore. Or if it's a territory, I can't hit my metrics in this too small of a territory, or I don't want to travel so much in this giant territory. All right, so challenge, location. A is advancement. That's what we're talking about. Some people want to leave because there's no advancement opportunities. But at the same time, sometimes we're building our own walls here. Like we talked about, the lady that created this AI position. I've seen it a lot with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those roles didn't exist 3 years ago, and now they're here. There's a whole department for that now. So sometimes these walls are fictitious. Sometimes the manager's not blocking you. It's just you're not having the right conversation with them, right? So, but an apparent lack of advancement can cause someone to want to make a job change. M is money. Sometimes that's an issue. But the 2 biggest ones are the next 2, people and security. Mm-hmm. So there's usually a person that's causing a big issue, whether it's a peer or a direct manager. And sometimes if the person feels like the manager's blocking them from promotion, they got to get away from that person. But security, stability is the S in CLAMPS, is the one that most often causes someone to make a job change. But when it's related to not being promoted, what you're going to see is that maybe it's actually a person issue. And if that person were to move on, that could change the whole dynamic of the whole thing. Sometimes moving to a different department within the company, even if it's sort of lateral, can get you into an elevator that's going up. So whether it's the right time to make a move or not, it's so case by case. But when you're thinking about it and you're having an A problem, advancement problem, what are the other comorbidities? And can those be solved at the company?
I love that. I love a framework, right? So clamps,
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that. And I think that's so important because it's really, even if it is one thing that you think is the main driver, there's always other factors to consider. And so that framework just reminds us that it's not any one thing in isolation. You want to think a bit more broadly about everything else that's going on. I think that's really a really wise strategy.
Here's one for you. What is the best way to build a personal brand externally? Even if someone isn't actively looking for a new role, how can they build their personal brand externally? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll be curious for your thoughts on that too. I think building an external brand, it's the same almost as building an internal brand, right? I think that you want to be showing up as somebody who is strategic, who is adding measurable value, and who is visible, right? So how can you do that externally? Well, if you're in medical affairs, I think you want to be thinking about the relationships that you're building with your key opinion leaders, with those nurses, with the other physicians, with the scientists, with any and everyone in your field that you have opportunity to connect with. I'll tell you, like the first role I got in pharma, I think the references that actually got me the job, they were physicians that I had been working with because I was working at the National MS Society, a nonprofit group. I was working closely with a lot of the KOLs that these particular biopharma companies cared about. And so when I interviewed and I brought my references to the table, you can bet that the majority of my references were actually the KOLs that the company was interested in, right, and engaged with. So having that network of people externally that a company is interested in, I think those are just really great relationships to focus on. You just always want to make sure that you're being the kind of person that people want to work with, right? That being likable is such an obvious, it seems, thing. And yet, building those personal relationships, really being thoughtful about how you're engaging with people, it goes an incredibly long way.
Yeah. So if you want my framework
Yeah, I
on this whole
do.
thing, first thing I would do is try to figure. Usually, it stems from a therapeutic area. Hey, I'm an AML expert. Okay, well then I want to connect with every single person that I can on LinkedIn that is somehow, some way shaped or in some shape or form in AML in industry. Okay, so that would be hiring managers even at other companies, other MSLs that would be my peers, other people in cross-functional departments. Okay, so that's step one. Connect with that community because then that creates your audience. Then when you're doing these special things, you want to post those on LinkedIn, what you can that's not proprietary or something. And then the other thing is you want to engage with their content. So you want to post content that's relevant to them, engage with content that's relevant or that they're posting, showing them that it's relevant to you. And by then you're going to start creating this brand awareness, just an awareness of you in that you're an expert in this field.
That's exactly right. And that's a strategy I think that's so often overlooked when people are currently employed, right? I think when people are on the job market actively, they're much more likely to be engaged in LinkedIn and applying some of those strategies. But why in the world would you wait, right? I think it's so important, and maybe this is a key takeaway for everyone listening as well. Get on LinkedIn and start building your external network. Start showing up, engaging with content, sharing what you can. When you come across an important or interesting article or insight, share it. Be the person who's leading the conversation, and don't just do it when you need something, right? When you need to be visible on LinkedIn because you want a new job or you're looking for a new job, but just do that. Make it a practice of doing that a little bit every day, a little every week, whatever it is. Don't wait until you need it. Don't wait till you need that visibility. Be the one leading the conversation. I think that's a really, really important takeaway.
Yeah, smart. We have time for a couple more questions. Do candidates typically secure higher level roles when moving companies, or are lateral moves more common? Mind if I take that one?
Yeah, please.
The whole idea of lateral moves is something I think about a lot. I've been involved in over 1,500 hires. And the
Wow.
vast majority of those were lateral moves. What I mean by that is doing the same function at company A, then going to company B to do the same function. But there's usually an increase in compensation, and you're usually either going to a better company or a better elevator. And so what I mean by elevator is if you're in an elevator and you're clicking button 8 and this elevator just is not going to level 8, well then you got to get out on level 7, go into another elevator at level 7, lateral move.
Yeah.
But when you click level 8 there, you're actually feeling some movement.
I love that.
What is sort of a misconception is that there's this wonkavator where you can go up and out in this diagonal move because what is a rule of thumb is if you want to move up, you typically have to do that within your own company. And if you want to move out of your company, you almost always have to do that at the same job.
Yeah.
But if you go to a better company, that's not lateral. And if you're going to a better elevator, that's not lateral. For instance, if a person is playing shortstop on the worst team in the majors, and then they go and play shortstop at the best team in the majors, oh, that's a lateral move. Yeah, their contract didn't even change. They're getting paid the same. But now they're on a winning team, a better team that is going to avail them to more opportunities, more postseason play, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So what is typical is when you change jobs, you're likely going to be doing similar or the exact same function at another company, but it's your job as the candidate and my job as the recruiter to make sure that you're at least increasing your situation. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I love the idea of an elevator, right? Because you can visualize that so clearly. If you're stuck, right? If the elevator just isn't going up, well, of course you're going to get out and go to a new elevator. And yeah, you're at that same floor, right? But feeling that lift, right? Getting some additional scope, being on a winning team, just being on a winning team is lift in and of itself. So yeah, I love that. I think that's super relatable. And you're right. There's really not a lot of Wonkavators out there. So
That's right.
that's a really good framework too.
One more question. Maybe this would be one I would field too, if you're okay with it. What are the top mistakes candidates make when applying for new roles?
Yeah, please take that.
I think the biggest mistake is applying.
Tell me
In
more.
this job market, it is so saturated. If a job gets posted on Monday, by Friday, there's hundreds of applicants. So mistake number one is applying. Because if you're just going to apply blindly and you have no network at that company, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
So the first thing you do is either play a game again of where are they now? Do you know anybody there? If no, does your recruiter network know people there? Can they get you in? Because then if the recruiter can get them in to at least talk to the hiring manager, then the hiring manager may know somebody that knows the candidate. And that backdoor reference becomes a thing. And they have an advocate, just not an advocate at the company. But if you don't know anybody at the company and nobody is, banging on the table saying you got to look at this person like a recruiter, well, then it's just not going to go anywhere in this job market. So I would say, do you know anybody there? Does your recruiter network know anybody there? And if no, maybe still apply, but it's a very low percentage. So
Yeah,
the biggest mistake candidates make is actually applying and not trying to go through their network.
I think that's a paradigm shift for a lot of people too. And, I know a number of people right now who've lost their jobs and are in the job market. It's really tough out there. And, I hear these stories. I applied for like 100 jobs. I applied for all these jobs and I'm not getting any callbacks. I'm getting ghosted, right? All of these terrible things. And what I hear you saying is, well, yeah, you're kind of going about it in the wrong way. Where you really should be prioritizing your time is with your network. It's really that network that you have. But I want to double click on one thing that you said, because I would get this question a lot when I was a chief people officer. And it was one of those questions that people would ask me kind of like, hey, can I close the door and ask you this really confidential question? And the question is, what do I do when a recruiter calls me, right? Like people, you mentioned building a recruiter network, and there's a lot of people, I think, who are, let's say they're currently employed and they're worried about taking that call from a recruiter because they're either afraid that it's going to start a ball in motion that they don't want to put in motion, or they're doing something disloyal. How do you respond to that?
There are people that I've been talking to for my entire career, 17 years, going on my 18th year, that I've never placed and will never place. But we've become friends, we've shared insights, we've gained from the relationship. But if a person only thinks of a recruiter relationship as a transactional relationship, then that's all it will ever be. Like, for instance, I only hear from some people when they're in a job change situation.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But the thing is, if you start that recruiter relationship, even if you're not actively looking, and you say, but if you see this, call me. And that might be 3-4 years until someone sees that, but that's okay. But you want that person to call you when that thing arrives. So I think it is foolishness to not develop a recruiter relationship with the top 3 people in the industry. And you could ask around at who those are, because they're going to be a conduit of not only new opportunities, but also valuable insights. Like there's people that have called me and said, hey, what do you think about this company? I'm like, run from that company. Do not take that job.
Right. Wrong elevator.
Yeah, wrong elevator. Trust me, that one's going down. Those valuable insights, even if it's not a transaction, see, because recruiters are salespeople, a lot of candidates think that we want a transactional relationship.
Right.
That's not the case at all.
No. Yeah.
So I would say is develop that relationship, and it's only going to work to your benefit.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's so funny because, again, I had people asking me this question a lot, and it was always, like, Angela, can I ask you this question? I don't know who else to ask, but you can't tell my boss, right? And my answer was always the same, and that's take the call. Take every call that comes across your desk. Because one, you're going to get valuable information and insights. Two, you're building your network, which again, network is net worth. Like just build your network every chance you can. But three, maybe you can help them, right? Like if you're not looking for a new role, hear what they're looking for, and maybe somebody in your network you can point them to, right? And then you're helping a colleague or former colleague. So, I think there's no harm frankly, can come from those calls, in my opinion. I think only good things can come. And so those questions always just kind of made me chuckle because I don't think they expected my answer to be what my answer was. I think they wanted me to say, oh, don't take the call. We need you here. We don't want you to leave. And I was like, no, take the call, learn what you can learn, and offer help where you can, right? There's no harm in building those relationships. In fact, I think some of those relationships are the most profitable, and not just in terms of new jobs, but just in terms of depth of insight and connection and mutual goals that you can build. So yeah, build your recruiter network. I think it really matters.
I want to just piggyback one more thing. We talked about backdoor references. Sometimes I'm the backdoor reference.
Oh, really? What does that work? How does that work?
So a hiring manager is like, hey, I'm talking with Angela Justice. What are your thoughts? Oh, hire her immediately. Or never heard of her.
Yeah.
What do you want someone to say about you?
Right. Right.
So building that relationship isn't crucial.
Well, it's funny. You said something earlier that you just said again, and I want people to hear it and remember it. It's not good if people don't know who you are, right? Like if anybody is asked, what do you think of Michael? And they say, who? I don't know who that is, right? That's not good. You want people to know who you are. You want to be visible. Again, it's that visibility. It's that brand that you're building for yourself. You want to control that.
Keeping my eye on the time here. Just want to do a quick recap. In this webinar, we learned how to identify and solve the right problems that make promotions inevitable. We learned how to gain visibility and support of cross-functional partners. And we learned how to position ourselves both for internal promotions and external promotions. That is the Angela Justice framework. And just behalf on everybody, all the attendees and all the people that will watch a recording of this, I want to thank you for sharing these valuable insights with us. We know that your customers spend a lot of money for what you shared with us today at a discounted price. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Michael. And thank you, because, it's one thing to hear from me, but to hear from a, top executive recruiter who's been in this business for so many years and placed 1,500 people, like just to have the framework validated by an external perspective who's seeing it on the other side, I think is hugely valuable. And then the additional insights you shared about how these positioning for these promotions aren't just useful for the immediate next steps, but frankly, setting yourself up for longer term career success. I hope people heard that. And, if I could ask just one thing, I'd like people
Please.
to just take one actionable step after this. I always want there to be action, something that you're actually going to do as a result of hearing these things. I want people to take a look at either they can look backwards or they can look forwards, work they've done or work they're wanting to do, and just run it through the 3 filters, right? Make sure it's strategically aligned. So it's something that you can say this is clearly aligned to your company's goals. Make sure it's measurable, it's demonstrating measurable impact, and make sure people know about it. And if you can apply those 3 filters to work you've done, work you're doing, you are going to position yourself for a promotion and position yourselves for longer term career success.
Beautifully said. Great recommendation. I also recommend everyone to follow Angela Justice on LinkedIn. She always has great content. I'm always clicking on it and checking it out. But also feel free to connect with me as well and the Pharmaverse podcast. Please keep in touch. But for now, that's a wrap.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks, everyone.